Number 5. When my younger brother and I were growing up, we shared a bedroom. Our bedroom window was right next to the front door of our house. Our neighbour's kitchen window faced the front door to our house and our bedroom window. At the time, my brother would have been 5 or 6 years old and was going through a real rough patch sleeping, having nightmares. It wasn't uncommon to be woken up in the middle of the night from my brother crying from the bottom of the bunk or something. The most common thing would be that he saw someone standing in the hallway or outside or whatever, you know, the usual stuff. So one day, I can remember being in the kitchen and there was a knock at the door. It was the father of the family who lived next door, who said he'd just come round to talk to my mum. So I went and told my mum he was here and just went back to what I was doing. Later that night, I was up watching TV in the lounge room. My younger brother and sister had gone to bed for the night, and my parents said that they had to talk to me about something. Turns out my neighbour, who does shift work at a factory, got up early hours of a Saturday morning to get ready to go to work. When he was in the kitchen, he looked out of the kitchen window and saw someone standing at the front of our house at my brother and my bedroom window. He just thought it was my dad outside having a cigarette and decided to tell my parents when he got home, just to make sure or something. I actually mentioned this to my brother a few months ago, one night over some drinks, not realising my parents had never actually told him about what the neighbour saw. And he didn't really look that fazed at all. So, from both my brother and I, whoever it was out that window that night, let's not meet. Number 4. I hoped I'd never get anything to write about on this subreddit. I don't really know how to start this. I'm a female and live with my parents and little sister in an area full of big single family detached homes, all built between 1920 and 1950. The yards are big and fenced, and our house is not the first one on our road, meaning that you have to first walk up the road about 5 minutes and pass like 10 other houses just to reach our house. This happened during the winter time, and during our winters there's a lot of snow. My father always shovels a path from our gateway to our shed in the backyard, but leaves other places untouched. During the winter, the sky goes dark really early, at 4 PM or so, and by dark, I mean pitch black. One morning my father woke me up by coming to my room and asking if I had borrowed his shoes last evening for something. This was a very weird question, and of course I said no. My father told me that after he had finished shoveling snow last evening, it had just turned dark. It had freshly snowed, so the snow was pretty and untouched everywhere, and he remembered admiring it in the light of the flashlight headband he uses when he goes outside, since our backyard doesn't have any lights, and it's all black without it. But this morning, there were footprints in the fresh snow. Big footprints that could only be made by a man, and since he lived with 3 women, he knew that instant that it hadn't been one of us. Of course, he had to make sure though. The footprints walked away from the path he had made into the fresh snow, and then it looked like the person had stood there for a while, then turned back to the path and left. Sure, some stranger's footprints in your backyard are creepy enough, but after I gave it some thought, it turned out even more creepier. I've just mentioned that our backyard doesn't have any lights, and because of that, it's pitch black. Well, since my dad left the backyard when it was already dark, I noticed the prints in the snow when the sun started to rise again. The person who left the prints had to stand there in the middle of fresh fallen snow, staring into nothingness in the darkness. Someone walked 5 minutes to reach our house, walked all the way into our backyard, and stood in pure darkness in the middle of fresh snow, and then just left. Weird person who stood in our dark backyard? Please, let's never meet. Number 3. Before I tell you what happened, I should provide you with some background info. I live in Tampa, Florida, and I come from a large Latin family. Growing up, my father used to tell my sister and I that if a stranger ever tried to take us, that we would never see them, my mum and dad, again, so we had to fight or we would be killed. Growing up, it was my family's tradition to go to Al Lopez Park to celebrate Easter. If you grew up in Tampa, you know that the original playground at Al Lopez was the best playground in the city. The playground was made of wood and resembled a castle. The entrance to the castle was lined with tall hedges to really sell the regal theme. So it's Easter Sunday, and my cousins and I are becoming antsy in anticipation for the egg hunt. In order to hide the eggs, my tia, Tayo, and my older cousin, 20 at the time, offered to take the children to the playground while the rest of the adults hide the eggs. After almost 20 minutes, my abuelo let out his signature whistle, which let us know it was time to return to the pavilion where my family was located. After my tia did a head count to assure we were all accounted for, my tio and cousin said that we were going to race back to the pavilion. As I was running through the hedges in last place, a man, who resembled the kidnapper in the Dennis the Menace, jumped out of the bushes and grabbed me. At this point, I was winded from the race and I was scared. I remember looking up at the man to see if it was one of my older cousins playing a trick on me, and how scared I was when he looked down at me and said, "I'm taking you to your mummy. You wouldn't want me to make her cry, would you?" As soon as he said that, I began to scream and kick at him. Luckily, my tia was not far behind me and noticed the commotion and began to scream and run towards me. My tio must have heard my tia scream as well, because by the time my tia reached me and pulled me away from the man, my tio was there almost seconds later. My tio began to chase the man through the wooded area near the playground, but unfortunately, the man got away. To this day, I still have nightmares about that day. Number 2. So, I just recently wrote a very long post about how I received a stalker's Valentine's Day present on my doorstep. It got me thinking of this one event that happened to me when I was about 7 years old. About, say, 14 years ago, I lived in a different house than I do now. I've been in my current house for about 10 years or so, if that kinda gives you an idea. Anyway, where I used to live is now completely the bad side of town. But it was never like that when I used to live there when I was young. It only got bad when I was in 6th grade, and after that, I moved to the completely opposite side of the town, where it's much safer. So it wasn't uncommon for parents to let their kids go outside by themselves. It was a nice summer day in Texas, and for once, it wasn't 101 degrees, but it was still pretty hot. So I decided I would go down to the school playground with my dog. Her name was Katie. My house was literally right across from the school, so my parents used to walk me to school every day because of that. But as I was walking with my dog to the playground, I remember I saw a man on the sidewalk across the street from mine. The man was dressed in all black. He wore what looked like a heavy black trench coat, black combat boots, with black sunglasses. This man was also very slender and tall in a way, but his skin was very pale, like he doesn't go out much, with very unkempt messy brown hair. He was just staring at me as I made my way across the street, but he didn't do anything, just stared. Even if he was wearing blackout sunglasses, I could just feel his gaze. When I got to the park, I saw some of my friends there, and I told them about how there was a man in all black on the sidewalk, and he was staring at me. When we went again to see if he was still there, he was gone. So my friends thought I was lying, saying, "Who would dress in all black in the summertime? That's insane." Now just remember, I live in Texas. Our summers are very, very hot and humid, so it was extremely out of place to see this guy in all black. So I just didn't worry about it, and just played with my friends and my dog as if nothing happened. For the next week, that man was always staring at me as I'd walk my dog into the park, but he'd then disappear after I arrived. Now, if this happened today, things would have unfolded very differently, but I was a very naive girl when I was young. After a week, it was the same as usual, staring at me as I walk across the street, but this time, when I walked back, he stopped me and asked, "Can I pet your dog?" My dog was growling at this guy, and she was never a dog to growl at anyone. This is the first time I've ever seen her be aggressive. I shook my head. No, unable to form words, then booked it back to my house with my dog. Once inside, I told my mum about what had happened. She was immediately worried and went to my game room to look out the sidewalk where I was standing. When my mother peeked through the blinds, this guy was just staring right back at us. Then, after about 5 seconds, he turned and started just walking away. My mum quickly called the police to make a report about this guy in all black. They never found the guy as far as I know, but I never saw him again either after that day. I figured he was going to try and snatch me. He never had his trench coat open, so who knows what he was hiding. But if my dog hadn't been there, I feel like something awful would have happened. So, black trench coat guy? Let's not meet. Number 1. Last year, I lived in an apartment by myself for the first time. I'm in college now, and I just moved out of the dorms. Of course, I waited until the last minute to find another place to reside, so my options were limited, as summer is a terrible time to find open apartments. I finally found one close to school, at a reasonable price, okayish neighbourhood. I figured I have a gun, pepper spray, and a taser, so I thought I was set. Oh, how I was wrong. Before I begin, let me set up the layout of the apartment. I was on the ground floor at the edge of the property. I had a very large balcony that was accessed through not one, but 2 sets of sliding doors. Very unsafe doors, might I add. The balcony had a view to the pool and volleyball courts. As I was so close to the pool, there was always a lot of traffic going by my apartment. In my bedroom, I had a large bay window that I had covered with blackout curtains. Beside the bay window was my bed, and this is very important to the story. I have a cat. Her name is Carl, and she is very nosy. Anytime anyone walked by our window, the first thing she did was pop her head through the curtains to see what was going on. The window fastly became her favourite spot in the apartment. When she sat on the windowsill, she created a little crack in the curtains that made it possible to see right into my bedroom and right onto my bed. So over time, I grew accustomed to all of the sounds that came with living by a busy area of my apartments. People walking backwards and forwards to the pool and walking their dogs. I would say at the same time every day, I would hear a whistle. I assumed it was a guy walking his dog. One day, the whistling sounded stationary, like the guy who was whistling was standing still. I was in my bed very close to the window, so it was very loud. My cat Carl, bless her heart, started to act funny. I saw her tail puff out and her hair stand up. Usually, this meant there was a squirrel or some other animal outside of the window. So I went to look outside to see what had her all riled up. To my horror, there was a man, about in his 30s, who was wearing sunglasses and a hoodie. It was in the winter, looking into my window. I was frozen in panic. When I finally gathered myself, I loudly screamed, "What the fuck are you doing? I'm calling the cops." He then, with a sly smile on his face, said, "Oops, wrong window," and scurried away. Wrong window? So he was actually looking into people's windows? This sickened me, as he was not walking the dog or going to the pool. He was just willy-nilly walking around, looking into people's windows. The part that disturbed me the most is that I'd heard his whistling multiple times, meaning this probably wasn't the first time he'd peeped into my window. I called the cops right away. They came and took my statement. They said they had other reports of a peeping Tom that matched my description, always with whistling. They never found the guy, but a few weeks later, I heard the same whistling. Shortly after that, my apartment let me out of the lease, and I moved the hell out of there. Let's never meet whistling peeping Tom. Well, anyway guys, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, then please leave a like, share and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any stories like these of your own which you would like to have shared, then please make sure to contact me and you may be featured in a future video. Well, anyway, I hope to see you soon and I'll speak to you later.